With me in the studio is KC Singh, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs. Delighted to see once again General Ashok Mehta in our studio after a long time. Good evening, sir. And Maruf Raza, thank you very much. Good to see you face to face once in a while, Maruf. And with us also is General Mrinal Suman. He's a defense procurement expert. And we have General Shankar Prasad and Alka Acharya. She's a former member of the National Security Advisory Board. Thank you very much. Alka Acharya, if I could begin by asking you, we spoke day before. Okay, she'll be joining us in some time. Just let me begin by asking General Shankar Prasad. You've seen the story develop over the last 3 or 4 days, General Shankar Prasad. Now it's clear to me, General Shankar Prasad, that the Chinese are basically telling us this is our territory and now we're not moving on. I just lost the signal with General Shankar Prasad, so that question goes to General Mrinal Suman. General Mrinal Suman, the Chinese have told us very clearly we are going to be here, we are not moving back anywhere. How should we respond now that this whole issue has dragged on this entire week?
First of all, let me tell you, having served in that area and having reasonable ground knowledge, the Chinese claim that there is a difference in perception about the line of actual control is wrong, totally wrong. That difference can be for 1 or 2 kilometers, but in this particular area, more than 10 kilometers, nobody can be mistaken. And it can't be taking them more than 20 years to realize that their area extends up to this place. It is a deliberate mischief intended to test the spine of Indian leadership and has been very well timed. Now, as regards the second part of your question about India's response, well, mature nations do not respond in an impulsive manner. We must try all our options that are available to us. To start with, we have a mechanism available on the ground level where the local military commanders try their best to resolve issues. Let's give that particular mechanism a chance to prove itself. Thereafter, we have got the trade, the diplomatic and all other options. The ground action, as very many people are clamoring for, is always the last option. Let me finally say that our response has to be very firm, unambiguous, yet it has to be calibrated and very well thought through. After analyzing our strengths and weaknesses,
which it is not as of now, because we are determined to call it an isolated incident. When the starting premise is, KC Singh, that you have the foreign minister, instead of ramping up the pressure on the flight, almost sounding apologetic, saying, oh, we must be sure it is and must be an isolated incident. He's essentially already giving the Chinese an upper hand.
That's absolutely right, but we must realize that this is not a one-off with India. All along their periphery at the moment. In fact, the Chinese ambassador in Japan only 2 days back was summoned, as was the Chinese ambassador in Delhi. Because the Chinese have set forth 7 ships to go to the disputed Senkaku Islands to contest the Japanese sovereignty of those islands. They've cordoned off the Scarborough Shoal, which is next to the Philippines, where...
and how are the Japanese responding?
Well, the Japanese said, we will hang on. And they have said that, in fact...
How would you compare the Japanese response to the Indian response?
Because the leadership has, in fact, revisited the Yasukuni Shrine, which they had not been visiting for a long time. And their Prime Minister has gone to the extent of saying that we did not invade Asia. So actually, the Chinese have ended up radicalizing the opinion in Japan. Okay. Whereas here what is happening is, anybody who says that a response should be a little more muscular is called a hawk.
Yeah.
As if, they've lost their mind. I think what should have been done by the government of India was to send the minister to Japan, send the minister to Philippines, to Vietnam, to all these countries. Send the signal to China that you will not divide us. If you do not deal with your periphery on certain principles of international comity and decency, then you will end up combining the
Alka Acharya, who's with us in the studio, I had the pleasure of speaking to her day before yesterday. She's giving you a cold stare as you just said that, by the way. Alka Acharya asked her this question and she said that, don't hype this up, essentially. Look at this in the context of 30 years of work that we have done together, a very strong partnership that has been built. Do you think, Maruf, responding to that assessment, that what is going on over the last 4 days in the media is hype?
Well, if the media doesn't bring it up, Arnab, who will? Yeah. If you go by how the pronouncements are coming from the political establishment, we are looking at a situation that they're praying like hell that the storm is going to go away and things will be back to business as usual.
Yeah.
But I'd like to draw your attention to the cover story in The Economist a few weeks ago about India. That can India actually be a global power? And The Economist says that it has the potential, but it has to ask itself the question, does it have the will to do so? And the biggest disconnect in India is between the inability of the political establishment to take tough decisions, to use what we have as our strategic assets. Now, I'd like to bring out two quick points.
The fact is that you're saying that the Ministry of External Affairs has, I'll put it simply, has no guts to take on China.
Not just the Ministry of External Affairs, but I'd even point fingers at the entire South Bloc, the Ministry of Defense. You are having the Defense Minister turn around and say, we'll do everything to protect the integrity of the country. But at the same time, you're not even letting troops make movement. In military terms, General Mrinal Suman says that let's not be hawkish, but in military terms, you've got 30 Chinese deployed out there. Common sense says that you have at least twice or thrice the number all around them to at least show your force that you can respond. Now, let me give you another point of information, and that is that as late as 2010, we keep talking of Sundarangchu, we keep talking of Nathula, 67 and 86, but 2010, the Indian Corps commander near Arunachal in Tawang, he took decision to hit at about 12 UAVs that came in from China.
Why have we been looking so nervous the whole week, General Ashok Mehta? Why have we been looking so nervous, so absolutely nervous, to the point to which, if this was a psychological game the Chinese are playing with us, then they would think they've already won?
Arnab, it is much more than a psychological game. The psychological game they have played with us for years. Remember that we are a defeated nation in their eyes. They are the victorious power. They are a satiated power. They required Aksai Chin, which they got through stealth.
True.
When I was in China recently...
How recently was that?
2 weeks ago, what the Chinese are telling us is this, that, and this include a few PLA generals, that we rule the decisions not to stay on in Tawang in 1962. And now they realize that as a result of these fruitless talks, these 30 years, you may have had peace, but there is absolutely no progress on the border talks. And what they told me unequivocally is that there will be no solution to this border talk because of public opinion, weak governments. And then they turned around to me and said, but General, why are you worried? You are the country which is sitting on the territory that you claim, i.e. South Tibet, Arunachal Pradesh. And I turned around and I said, well, you are sitting in Aksai Chin. Having realized that they cannot get any concessions in Arunachal Pradesh, this incident is not an isolated incident.
No, it's not. But Alka Acharya pinned her hopes on this entire talk process, the border talk process, which you say, according to your intermediaries, you've heard in Beijing 2 weeks back, they don't believe is going to go anywhere. It's an eyewash. Alka Acharya, if it is this eyewash, first of all, you accept the view that is emerging from this side. The border talks are an eyewash, and that this was a deliberate act of aggression. I'd like you to respond to General Mehta.
Well, thanks Arnav for that welcome with reference to that cold stare, which is clearly you intend to make my pronouncements a test case of my patriotism. But really I do not subscribe to that line of argument that the border talks or the discussions or the dialogues or indeed the entire efforts since 2003 an eyewash or a waste of time. I do believe that there is a dispute at the core which somehow does not seem to lead to its logical conclusion. What does a dispute mean? A dispute means that you are not going to take my version of what I claim, and I'm not going to take your version. Now, if that is the case, then to beat one's breasts and say that how dare they contest our claim.
No, I don't think so. I don't think we are saying that. I'm afraid.
I'm sorry, Mr. Goswami, that is precisely what you are saying.
I don't think.
If I may just be allowed to complete what I'm saying.
I think you got it wrong there.
No, I am saying that what the Chinese have done is a deliberate act. Yes, it is. Do they do this deliberately to test our case? No, I don't think so.
You don't? They do it accidentally?
I think what they have done deliberately is what they believe they claim to be their own.
But isn't
what
that
is
a
our
very apologist position
What is
for
our
China?
no? What is our response? We contest it. Why? Because we claim.
But they're sitting on our land.
No, so that is what we contest.
They are sitting on our land. We are not sitting on theirs.
Precisely, Arnab. We contested because we believe that this is our land.
But Ms.
So
Acharya,
what? So what we have contesting claims.
No, one second. Theoretically, your position is correct. Practically, I'm sure it doesn't hold. Because I'll tell you why. I'll tell you just one fact out of many. According to Indian surveillance, as of October 2011, Dr. Acharya, Indian surveillance reveals such a lot of infrastructure on the Chinese side of the LAC. Huge military infrastructure on the Chinese side of the LAC. And you know, Ms. Acharya, this did not exist till 2008. In other words, in the last 3 years, they've hugely ramped up their infrastructure. Now what are they telling us? Don't build your infrastructure. So this is not a theoretical situation. It's a very well planned aggression. We're getting two responses from this side. Here the other side.
In fact, I'd like to bring out a quick point that, you know, with the Pakistanis who have seceded the Shaksgam Valley to the Chinese, the Chinese are now not letting them set foot there also. So when even on a friendly gesture you secede land to China, you can forget about it. So what they have a history of nibbling away into territory, whether in Aksai Chin or in the South China Sea region.
They have an eye on an Indian airstrip. I like to get Shankar Prasad in, because the fact is they have an eye, Dr. Shankar Prasad, let's look at it in military terms. They have an eye on an airstrip. It's not some, you know, theoretical battle for them. They want an airstrip in Daulat Bay Oldie sector. That's what I've been told. They want to stop our infrastructure. They really ramp up their infrastructure.
And why they want to do it is because they've made about $32 billion worth of investment.
There is just
in
one
the Shaksgam Valley and Baltistan area, and they're not going to let their investment be not suitably protected.
There is just
so this is the start of
let's get everyone in and then
possibly more encroachment.
Dr. Shankar Prasad, you've heard different points of view. Alka Acharya's point of view, Maruf, KC Singh and General Mehta's. I'd like you to respond principally to the arguments made by Dr. Alka Acharya, because I believe they are contrary to yours, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, Arnab, we have to look at the overall perspective as to how things have developed over the last 30 years with China. We must understand that the Chinaman thinks in long-term perspective, and they have been working on development of infrastructure across the border for the last 30 years. It takes many years to build 3,700 kilometers of roadways, to develop trains, to develop logistic bases, air bases and landing grounds. Today they are in a position where they can dictate terms to us. Having said that, let us come to the current situation. The current situation is that they have ingressed into our territory by about 10 to 15 kilometers in the DBO Depsang plain, and are not wanting to get back, and are saying that if you want us to go back, please, you will not take any further development action on your side of the border. Now that is absolutely bizarre. We have every business to develop our own infrastructure to the level that they have. Anyway, let's leave that for a moment. Today the timing is such that we should not fall into the trap of the Chinese. The Sun Tzu teaching itself says, don't do what the enemy wants you to do. Do things what the enemy does not want you to do. If you react militarily immediately to this intrusion of 10 kilometers by 30-40 people, you're going to have a problem. At the same time, we have to show an aggressive and a good strength. And to that extent, I am aware,
Shankar Prasad,
and I'm aware that equal number, if not larger number, of Indian troops are already there and are facing the Chinese. If they have 4 to 5 tents, perhaps we have 10 to 12 tents, just 150 meters away. And therefore, there is no weakness being displayed by the troops in contact, but at the same time, we have to look at the strategic perspective and take an action when it is correct militarily and diplomatically to do that. And that particular exercise is being undertaken by the China Study Group, where the DGMO and the Vice Chief are present.
Okay, two views emerging. One second. KC Singh, please, before that.
Arnab, just to put it in perspective, we've had the special representatives talks. 15 rounds have taken place. They were basically established to settle the border issue.
Yes.
The talks last year was stalemated. It was quite clear that the Chinese were dragging their feet. They were not willing to move forward, even though in 2005 the basic principles for settling the border had been established. That is when we were moving closer to US, a civil nuclear deal was getting negotiated. The Chinese were then willing to accommodate. When they found that your deal is final, that you've moved towards the high table, Americans have even said you should be a member of the Security Council, they've tightened the screws on this side. You've had also a leadership change. When the new president took over, he came up with 5 points. Xi Jinping, almost like the punch shield. And amongst them was to maintain stability and status quo on the border. Now to upset it so quickly, it is true that along the line of actual control, patrols have been going back and forth. So what are the limits, what you thought were your perceived limits? So what should we do
now? We realize that they are following a twin approach. One is approach of talking to you, engaging with you,
have to do
confidence building measures, etc., and then completely violating the spirit of
last point, you have to do 3 or 4 things.
With their actions.
One is their Prime Minister is coming. Now Prime Minister doesn't deal with security or with foreign policy, he deals with economy. To say that visit will go along, nothing will happen to it, in public you can say that. But essentially they are sending him to deal with areas they are interested in, which is your market. Now you have to subtly convey it that that will not be available if this is going to be the behavior on the border. Secondly, yes, ramp up your presence there. Nobody is saying declare war on China or forcibly evict them, but certainly ramp up your presence there. Thirdly, increase your contact with all the other countries from here. In fact, PM should have picked up the phone and talked to Prime Minister Abe. They're old friends.
And the very fact of suggestions which I want to go back to Alka Acharya, and very suggestions which you make.
Why has the Prime Minister not spoken to Prime Minister Abe? We have a common problem with China.
Maybe
they have a problem.
We have a problem. At this stage.
We are scared. We are taking what is essentially appeasement. The contrary thing to appeasement is not war. I think what we are saying is you must balance your relationship. You must contain China. And you must take steps to tell them that if they do anything, then they're countermeasures.
So, Alka Acharya, what the point of view here is that if they are escalating it militarily, India should escalate it also in 3 ways, according to KC Singh. 1, linking it to trade and their expectations of India. 2, increasing the military presence, which I presume you're also talking about saying no to all this rubbish from their side about stopping our infrastructure work. And 3, he says, building a diplomatic ring against China. These are the 3 options KC Singh believes we should now explore, given their intransigence through the entire week.
And one more, call off the Defence Minister's planned visit.
Call off the Defence Minister's planned visit. So both the gentlemen on this side believe it is time for us to escalate it,
or at least
using these 4 options. You want to add a 5th before I go back to?
The fact is that what do we have an army for? You have an army to guard your country's territorial integrity. On one side, we are all crying ourselves hoarse, saying that Indian territory has been transgressed. And then you're not giving the army even permission to eyeball them and browbeat them into probably moving back. And you're saying all orders will come from Delhi, and Delhi is surrounded by a bunch of people who are pacifists, who are hanging on to tired dictums of non-alignment. This doesn't work. The world's moved on from Bandung.
I think it should be fair to give Alka Acharya as much time as we've given to the 3 of you. The point being made here is act to tell the Chinese that, listen, we are not pushovers. Alka Acharya, your response to 3 gentlemen.
Look, the fact that you take a position on continuing with the dialogue to sort out a situation does not mean you are appeasing or you are pacifist. Just as it was said that asking for a tough position does not mean that you're asking to go to war. Similarly, asking for dialogue does not mean you're appeasing. Now, my point is that by taking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 measures, you are ratcheting up the tensions to a point where how do you climb down? Do you have the wherewithal to say, okay, let's take a line of action and take it to its logical conclusion? Because in truth, you will have to be prepared to take it to that point where you will...
One of the gentlemen here will respond to you. 1 minute. She says that, you want to ratchet it up? Fine. 1 minute. But she throws a question back at you. She says you ratchet it up if you know you can take it to its ultimate conclusion. If you're essentially weak... If you're essentially weak... diplomatically, economically, or more importantly, militarily, you're not in a position to do all this,
Let's take Japan and China.
Let's respond to her directly.
Let's take Japan and China. The Japanese factories were attacked in China. Japanese ambassador's car was attacked. But they've not gone back. They said these are barren islands. They are not their boundary. They're barren islands given back to them by the Americans.
So what's your point to her?
My point is that the Japanese in fact, is ratcheting up the nationalism in Japan, and it's for China to take a call. Do you want an aroused Japan with its militaristic past coming back by behaving the way you are behaving, or are you going to be accepting laws of the seas, principles on which they are settled, and the 2005 principles for settling the border?
So what he's telling you is, in turn, that it's not a question about, you know, a parity in military terms or strategic terms. It's a question of declaring our intent.
Yeah.
And of realizing that we might not be alone in the world in wanting to take on China.
Look, on the one hand, we have a situation which requires bilateral settlement.
Sure.
I don't think that anybody here, and these are all learned gentlemen here, have any doubts about the fact that this border problem that boundary issue that we have with them has a lot of problems on either side. It's not as if we have is the Indian position on the boundary absolutely clear and unequivocal in terms of its evidence and claims? No, it is not. Is the Chinese? No, it is not. Now, the point I made about ratcheting up the tensions is that then you are holding this entire edifice which has been created over the past 2 decades to ransom.
That can't become a trap,
if we are focused on the fact that we need to build this relationship.
Alka, we have done this when General Jaiswal's visit to China was called off for almost a year.
And the staple visas.
On the staple visas, for almost a year, defense ties were cut, joint exercises were cut. So, we have done it in the past. Escalation means that control must be with you. So, what stops you from sending 30 troops to another place, which we know is across the other side, and setting up a post?
Look, I mean,
we can do
and Ms. Acharya, did the Chinese not pull back? Rajiv Gandhi told Sundarji that you pull back. Sundarji said you make alternative arrangements if you think I should pull back. I won't pull back. Seeing the resolve of General Sundarji, I would not say the resolve of the late Rajiv Gandhi, the Chinese pulled back. In other words, when the Chinese are stared back, they pull back. They have no option but to pull back at that situation.
To take the case of 86.
Yes.
In 2013, when you have other mechanisms in place, in 86 we did not have
the mechanisms are failed.
Are not working. In fact, the Joint Secretary was supposed to be in Beijing that day.
I don't think
operating one of those mechanisms the day they set up the camp.
Look, I don't think the mechanisms have failed. What is happening is that they are taking a long time because of the complexities of the issues involved. You see, somewhere we have to understand these are two different logics that are operating. You have to follow one particular logic and take it to its rightful conclusion.
Alka,
with respect, I mean, I have great respect for your intellectual understanding of Sino Indian issues, but 3 quick points. A, if there is a disconnect between what Beijing wants done vis-a-vis India and what the ground commander on the ground is doing, then we should look at this purely as a tactical adventure which we should deal with. Past military experience has shown that whenever you've confronted the Chinese, they have pulled back. Nathula, Sumdrangchu, more recently 2010 around Tawang. So when we've had military commanders who've gone on and got on with their job, the Chinese army, despite all the hype, is not a battle-tested army. The only last time they went to test their abilities against Vietnam, and they got a bloody nose. And the final point is, China, you are talking about mechanisms working. Since 2008, China has gone around on ground to say there's only 2,000 kilometers of a border that is recognizable. 4,000 kilometers plus that India claims is not even acceptable to us.
If we are to be reasonable, if we are to be reasonable, I'm coming back to you, Alka Acharya, in a bit, because I want to go to Shankar Prasad. If we are to be reasonable, if the responsibility of this process is on both our shoulders, then, and if there's a system of parity, they want us to scale down activities on our side of the LAC.
Raise it in the mechanism.
Then we say,
raise it in the mechanism.
Put it in the mechanism that China should also scale down its activities on its side of the LAC.
You do not
May I ask, when the Chinese were building what you say infrastructure, did India protest?
No, so you are saying the onus is...
I'm not
saying... Did we question? May I ask you that? You are asking, did we protest?
Yes.
I would say that's a wrong question to ask, with all respect, Professor Acharya, because the question should be, in the present context, not did we protest. Did we question? We did not question.
Why?
China will finish its rail network in Tibet up to, I think, Shigatse city to the Indian border by the end of next year. We didn't, because we respect their sovereignty.
The point is,
they don't respect our sovereignty.
The point is that the land or the area under consideration is disputed. So when they were making on them, I don't think that was part of the disputed area, which is why India just didn't say anything. The Chinese kept on building.
Are you saying
I am therefore
Aksai Chin, where they sit, is we have mentally reconciled to the fact that that's a given away to China?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it is disputed, which means...
So they've made improvements in the disputed territory, and so are we.
The whole point is that either we have a certain understanding on this, that when disputed areas are concerned, neither side shall move.
Okay. I'll tell you, we have respected what they have done, because their spurt in infrastructure, if I'm not mistaken, started right before the 2008 Beijing Olympics, and we did not either at that point of time want to create strategic trouble for them, because they expected trouble in Tibet a few kilometers away from Demchok. It's a fact. It's a fact. We did not create trouble for them, because we have been accepting of the Chinese in many ways. This situation, they have flipped it over to us. They are turning our entire area into an area where they want control over how we determine our infrastructure. I think India is now, they want us to destroy our fortified positions, stop building our infrastructure, and pull back, not even do patrols. I think it's a very critical situation, and I think countries would have to take a decision. Shankar Prasad, please, I want to bring you. Yes, Shankar Prasad.
Arnab, let us please understand what the Chinese have done right now is a tactical action of 30 people involved in it. Tactically, we have to respond, and perhaps we are responding, and we can continue to respond tactically. While tactical responses are there, we have to look at strategic responses as well. And for a long-term resolution of the disputed area, and to be able to negotiate from a position of strength when the borders have to be finally settled, we have a strategic environment where we can do this. Therefore, we need to develop our infrastructure, create better capabilities, both militarily and diplomatically and economically. And then only we can really negotiate the final settlement of the border. But right now, we cannot show weakness. We cannot show weakness to a tactical maneuver of 30 people. We are capable of responding tactically, and as Casey said, we must respond in whichever way the armed forces and the China Study Group thinks it's appropriate. But at the same time, let us not build up a hype that we want to go to war with China right now. For that, we need to prepare, and we need to prepare for many months before we think of a proper engagement with China.
Nobody wants to go to war, leave alone. Let me also tell you, I think China would not want to go to war with India. They have enough trouble of their own. The problem is they create trouble on our side. Are we completely incapable of creating enough trouble for them?
Of course we can create trouble for them.
And a country
there are many ways we can do that.
Threatened. No, we don't create trouble for them. We are most accommodating. We don't talk of issues which are prickly for them.
And
we don't create trouble in Tibet. We don't talk about Xinjiang. We don't talk about their autonomous groups. We don't embarrass them in international forums. But if that country is going to take us on this military options, why should we rule out any of these options?
The first time our Prime Minister meets the new President, Xi Jinping, unsolicited, he asks for the joint mechanism on the Brahmaputra waters and says that we respect China's Tibet policy. That why should you have to say this? The Chinese
you think that's appeasement?
The Chinese,
you think that's appeasement?
Chinese don't come and tell you that sticky.
You think our policy of appeasement is something that the Chinese are testing?
No, I think China handling has been on the verge of appeasement. 2 points, Arnab. Why does this happen on the eve of a high-level visit? Before President Hu Jintao, there's ambassador in Delhi suddenly announces Arunachal as ours. Now again on the eve of the prime ministerial visit. Are they having some vulnerabilities at home that they have to appease the hawks before engaging India? That's hardly a way of normal dealings with India. That just on the eve of a visit, you first throw a bone to the PLA and then you start talking to India. I mean, this is very peculiar.
Why do you think that is the case?
No, I don't think that is the case. I think if we look at the 500 plus incursions that are all the time mentioned.
This is a camping.
No,
this is not an incursion.
Okay, more than an incursion. Yet another episode on the border.
No, this is not yet another.
It's not yet another episode on the border.
Okay.
It's air, land and sea.
Water. Let's talk of the recent incident. I was not trying to refer to that particularly. What I was trying to say is that let us not try and build a construction on the implications or the thought process behind these things just before a visit. I think there are plenty of these episodes which have happened, which have been out in and out of.
Do you really believe? Because you really believe that this is just they just walked over. It's like you know.
Look, I will not speculate on this because I think we can speculate endlessly.
No, what is your experience?
Well, I have 2 points to make with reference to Tibet on the one hand. I think if you talk to the scholars over there, there is enormous amount of suspicion about India's actual intentions as far as Tibet is concerned. The government in exile is constantly mentioned. The fact that the Dalai Lama has got all sorts of opportunities to make political points, that is constantly seen by the Chinese as, they call it strategic hypocrisy.
I don't think
I'm just telling you, I am telling
the Dalai Lama into making political
I
statements.
am telling
Have we?
you.
In fact, I think we have been extremely cautious.
Forbidden from
anyway, that may be so, but if you remember,
what gives you the impression that India is encouraging the Dalai Lama to make
I
political
am saying
statements?
the Chinese perception.
No, the Chinese perception
Why?
is wrong.
No, because it was said that we are extremely accommodating and so on.
Does the Chinese perception have any basis in your view?
I think the fact that there is a government in exile is a fact which can be perceived. I mean, supposing some militant group in the northeast were to go and set up a government in exile across the border, and already we know that some leaders are being given shelter. You see how we perceive it. So we do have our suspicions about what is happening on the border as far as Chinese policy is concerned. So therefore, I'm just trying to bring the point to its conclusion that while there are these perceptions on both sides and there are enough grounds for each side to suspect the other, and there is all this talk of strategic distrust, my point is, in all this, we have to maintain a core commitment to the dialogic process.
You know, 70% of our trade is tilted in their favor. All their companies do business with us. You know, you know about the trade. Went from 3 billion, it's gone up to some 75. 80 billion, out of which I'm told 58 billion is Chinese.
That's right.
Point is this: we don't have the courage to tell the Chinese, don't try to treat us with contempt. What the Chinese are doing through this entire incident on the Dem Chowk, and Mrinal Suman, I'd like to go back to him once on this, is that they are treating us with absolute contempt. And while General Suman, I appreciate what you're saying, that don't escalate it. But should we send a message to them a little bit more tough than, you know, saying, oh, this is a small, localized, isolated incident, can we not talk much about it, please?
No, right at the outset I said that it's not a local incident, it's very well thought through and it's a deliberate mischief to test our resolve, let's say. And I also said that we must deal with it firmness in an unambiguous manner. But that doesn't mean taking military action at the local level, trying to throw out 30 people or 35 people, because when you try adventure of this type, invariably it can spin out of control. Second, what Alka has very rightly said, since 1962, let's grant to the government for all its mistakes and flaws that it has ensured that the sanctity of borders vis-a-vis China has been maintained. Since 1962, we haven't lost an inch to China. There may be intrusions, there may be patrolling problems, there may be areas of misperception and things of that nature. But all said and done, the system in place, both diplomatic, economic, the military flag meetings, they have delivered to the extent that as on date, we are in a comfortable position and we really have sort of, let's say, not lost any area to the China. So my point is that rather than getting into my point is, rather than getting into belligerence and getting into rhetoric, which may push our government into a corner, forcing it to take a particular course of action, we must give enough leeway to the government to try all avenues at its disposal, including trade, as Arnab, you very rightly said, that diplomatic, talking to the other countries.
Do nothing, expect nothing, Be fearful.
I never said that.
Because you cannot build this up.
No, I have never said that.
When
Please do not put words in my mouth. I have never said do nothing.
But and we have in the past as well.
But I have also but please do not put words in my mouth. I have never said that. But I have also said don't get into a sumo battle.
Begin with the premise that hello, let's not do anything because we can't take on China all the way.
No,
I don't know if that is the starting ground. Very quickly.
Who is saying do nothing?
You are wrong.
But you're saying don't ratchet it up. Any escalation you describe as
Isn't that what a rational actor would do? Isn't that what mature countries who are supposed to discuss their disputes on the table?
No, they are not discussing. They're not even having a flag meeting.
I'm sorry, there are discussions going on. We don't know what's happening.
No, they have not moved an inch from. If Malka Acharya, if they had gone back, we wouldn't be debating this. If they had gone back, there have been 2 flag meetings, there have been 3 phone calls, there have been innumerable. If they had moved, tonight we would not be sitting and discussing this issue.
No, that's what
we are doing this because they haven't moved. They haven't moved.
Yeah, well, first is that with respect to Dr. Acharya, discussions take place a lot between track-through groups and academics. At governmental level, they come for 45-minute meetings, after which half the time goes in interpretation and the rest of the day goes in sightseeing. Let me also tell you the reality.
Quickly.
2 points. One is that the PLA is trying to give a message to the Chinese premier, don't go soft on India. And the second point is that it is not just a coincidence that this happened on 15th April.
It was
the Chinese white paper that came out on 10th April.
Last word to KC Singh and last word to KC Singh and General Mehta.
I think both the mood of the country, the political mood here, the government has to be sensitive to it. The China policy is too much in the hands of the sinologists. We had a shipwreck 50 years ago in 1962. Let's not repeat it. It's a different India, it's a different Asia, there's a rising China, rising China. It needs to be contained. There's a similar dilemma the US had vis-a-vis Soviet Union in 45. And there was a diplomat in Moscow who sent a long telegram. It's called the long telegram on which containment of Russia is based. 2 years it was ignored by Washington. They tried dealing with the Soviet Union and with Stalin. When he had occupied half of Europe, then they started containment. I think you have to start a containment strategy.
Don't react late.
Economists who say that increase in trade will improve the political environment for border talks. That has proved rubbish. Number 2, that these border talks, the 3 series of border talks, were every time torpedoed by the Chinese. The exchange of maps, the demarcation, and now this special representatives at the SR meeting. Nothing has come out of this.
No, they've been dragging their feet the last 2 years.
Nothing has come out of it.
It's a pity.
So nothing will come out of the border talks. And lastly, if we could do a Sumdrong Chu in 1986, why couldn't we have done something like that now?
Well,
we did it.
Well, I think the onus is on the Chinese. The General Shankar Prasad, last word to you. I think the government response right now appears to be very cagey and unsure. I mean, there's no other way to describe what the External Affairs Minister said. Very briefly, Shankar Prasad, last word to you before I wrap this up.
Let us keep a strong profile at the tactical level. Let us give a message that we are not a weak country or a weak army, but at the same time, let us today resolve that we are going to improve our infrastructure, our capabilities over a number of years, and then be able to negotiate with them on equal terms, perhaps from a position of strength. Let us not show weaknesses today, but let us also plan for a long-term perspective.
For that, the government needs to move with some resolve. For that, the government needs to move with some resolve. All ministers, all ministries, external affairs, environment, defense, everybody needs to go together and show some resolve.
Let us not also negate everything that has happened. I think we have plenty to show for the last few decades.
Absolutely.
And let's not
surely we do. Surely we do. But the dragon must be contained at one point. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me on that debate. Thank you.